All right, we are live, everyone. Peace. We had a very interesting chat behind the scenes. It's kind of why we were held up. But before we start, let me just say we have a very interesting guest today. Maybe one of our best. No pressure on you, Armun. I
Am I
found
coming through okay?
you're coming through perfectly. And
Okay.
let me see in the chat if peace, Marcel. How are you, my friend? Marcel from Holland. Welcome. Okay, so I found Armin on another channel, uh, the Fakeologist channel. He's a very intelligent man. He's from Portugal, and we're going to talk about a few things today. We're going to talk about uh, his country, its history, the interesting occult aspects of why, um, based on our understanding, the way they present the story to us, a peripheral part of Europe, all the way in the corner, western corner of Europe,
Mhm.
became the first uh, real world empire. The real New World Order that we know, it really started off with the Portuguese. And Armin, in private, mentioned the Templar hand in the creation of the Portuguese. Now, my listeners, if you've listened to um, my Crusades live stream. This is going to be a very nice addendum, you might say. Peace, well, the wolf. Um, the Crusades, the creation of Portugal, all of these have a link. And while Armand, uh, I don't know, I think I should start with my very first question to our. Before we go deep into our subject matter, uh,
Mhm.
Armin, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your channel, your work, so that our audience can locate you and find you.
Well, I'm Portuguese, born and raised, never left, never lived elsewhere. And I always was spiritually inclined. I always felt, and when I say spiritually inclined, is not necessarily religious, but I always felt that there was layers to reality that weren't answered or weren't depicted appropriately by religions and
Hmm.
science and so on. So I was always inclined to pursue, to seek what it was. I mean, what is it that I could feel? There was a sense that there was something else in reality that I wasn't that wasn't visible, that I wasn't seeing. And so, I started off my own path. Eventually, one of the key points was that really got me deeper was 9/11, because when I understood that media was able to completely fabricate, to completely fake something as big and as impactful, then it started to make sense why I felt that way. Why I felt that there was something behind the scenes that I wasn't really grasping. And so it started a path that, of, let's say, discovery, which I consider more to be self discovery than actual discovery of anything external. Of course, it's done through external
Hmm. Research.
discovery, but in fact, we are always discovering ourselves through the interaction with others and through the interaction with the world.
Hmm.
And so here I am. I have a channel with that you're showing now on the screen, right?
Yes.
With several smaller videos, and now recently with podcasts where I conduct conversations like this. And also, I've written a book recently, a fiction
Right.
book. Yeah.
Yes, I was showing that. Let me show that.
Hmm.
It's, you can find it on lulu.com. Let me share. It's called Repentant Magdalene. And I actually saw a video you had on your channel on this book you're writing.
Yes, yes, and there's also an audiobook version read by me on Ko-fi as well. The
On
links
Ko-fi.
are also there. Yeah.
Okay. So you actually you have a really good voice, if I do say so myself. Check this out. This is Armunn narrating.
And Portal Complex wrote and played the music.
Oh, okay.
Magdalene is repentant. What for? She knows not exactly. And now she was enveloped in the aura of ancient trees, stepping on dead leaves and on the moss that sprouted out of the stone as if it was one of its vital organs, and breathing the same air that the birds filled with chirps. But it's too risky. The pain is too much. It would destroy me. It is. It hurts a lot. Often it does, yes. But destroy you? You are indestructible. Because that which is living does not die. That which truly makes you living remains. You may become silent, evade, hide, but you will always return home. And you return home. Repentant Magdalene, you returned home.
So I can tell you are a pro, like your video editing. This is this is not, this is a serious body of work we have here. Now, oops, back to what I wanted to share.
Yep.
So everyone go subscribe to Armin, and if you have any questions, please type in the chat, and I'll ask Armin. Now back to Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
Now Portugal is the westernmost country in Europe, and it formed during a period when its location was actually dominated by Muslims, the Moors, the Andalusian Empire, the Moorish Empire, and Portugal and Spain conducted something called the Reconquista. Let me just pull up
Mm-hmm.
the Reconquista. This is the wiki. So this was the reconquest of Al Andalus from the invading Muslims, and Armin told me that Portugal's Reconquista had a lot of Knight Templar hand in it, as well as other. Am I remembering that correct?
That's correct. Yes. For Portugal, the Templars were more influential. For Spain, or the kingdoms that became the United Spain, was the Order of Santiago and later on the Order of Calatrava. That played a more important part. But for Portugal was clearly, and I mean, even from the onset, from the beginning of the Condado Portucalense, which is the county of Portugal, there's a Templar hand for sure. The Templars were there to help conquer the military holdings of the Condado Portucalense, and later on remained and had several holdings, several castles to the order,
Right.
signed to the order, to help with the military intervention further south. So eventually, it reached the Algarve and conquered the entirety of Portugal, and of course, in the Spanish side, the entirety of Andalusia. Yeah,
Yeah, I noticed there's a lot of Templar castles in Portugal.
yeah,
They built a
yes.
lot of castles.
Hmm.
And so, what do you know about the Knights Templar? Because as far as I know, they had a huge hand in the Holy Land Crusades, and we'll get into that as well. The the Holy Land aspect of the Crusades as versus the Iberian, you know,
Hmm.
in Portugal and Spain. You know, both areas had Muslim Christian wars and a lot of interesting and coincidences, you might say.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, for sure that the Templars had some sort of access to a pool of knowledge
Mm.
that wasn't available. I mean, I, as you probably already understood, I'm very, very skeptical about the written history.
Yeah.
But we're talking about it in a sense of taking it as a narrative, and for sure that the Templars had access to some pool of knowledge that was inaccessible to the generalized kingdoms of the time. And it makes absolutely zero sense the way they were formed. It makes zero sense the strength that they immediately seem to convey and to have.
Mm.
And if you look, I remember in your video about the Crusades that you talk about, demonic influence and magic and so on.
Hmm.
If you look at the coat of arms of the
Let me pull
Templars,
that up.
so with the horse and two riders, right?
Yeah, let me pull that up.
Yeah,
Keep talking.
yeah. The if you remember that, that is clearly something well known in black magic, in the voodoo, for example, which is the chevalier. The
Oh,
chevalier, yeah, the chevalier is when someone is possessed by a spirit. The spirit rides the person as if it was a horse, and they're even in the vernacular of these traditions, there's even the word horse meaning a possessed person, right? So the spirit rides the person as a horse. Now,
okay.
when you see two riders on one horse, of course they give us their interpretation. What I see there is exactly a possession by two. One is in the reins, and the other one is a passenger, right?
Mm.
So the one in the reins would be the spirit, the external spirit per se. Let's say the one that's moving that person, and the passenger is the actual spirit of the person, the actual soul, if you like, just unable to actually influence where the horse is going, but just going for the ride and witnessing, right? So the to me, this is the interpretation of that. This is a magical symbol, and not merely an interpretation of brotherhood or that kind of thing. Now,
Armin, I noticed one thing. This is Latin, but
mhm,
the word sigil is right there in plain sight. Sigil, sigil,
mhm,
and sigil means a
symbol, yeah.
symbol or like a
Mhm.
magical.
Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. And it's all based on, of course, the idea of a temple, with, as you well know, the Temple of Solomon being the archetype
Mhm.
um, of this order. Let's say the inspiration of this order. And so, what is evident is that both in the formation of Portugal, in the conquest of territory further south, and in the maintenance, in the later maintenance of Portugal as an independent kingdom, which proved to be essential for the Templars, instead of being amalgamated by the fiercely Catholic Spanish.
Hmm.
That became very important for them. They put a lot of resources into it. There was always a great camaraderie, let's say, between the Portuguese kings and the Templars,
Hmm.
to the point of in the 1200s, the king Don Dinis, Don Dennis in English, when the Templars were expelled from their territories by the papal command, they were received in Portugal with open arms. Don Dinis delayed to fulfill the orders of the Pope of confiscating their territories. They
Hmm.
put them back in their territories. He delayed. He played for time, and eventually got the Pope to agree with, because the Pope wanted to first confiscate, right? So confiscate for the papacy. Then he said, well, they have proven their worth and their works for Christ, etc., etc. So he played for time. Then the Pope said, okay, then their territories go to the Hospitallers instead.
Hmm.
And Don Dinis said, well, the Hospitallers are foreign to this country. They don't know anything about Portugal and about, the culture here, so it would make no sense, etc. So after, some time has passed, eventually the Pope agreed to Don Dinis, the King of Portugal at the time, idea of, okay, we disband completely the Templars and we create a new order with a new symbol, with a new name, and everyone Templar just moves to that order, basically. So it was the maintenance of the Templars under a different name, and
Okay.
then it was called the Order of Christ, in full, the Ordem dos Cavaleiros de Cristo, which means the Orders of the Knights of Christ.
Let me find that. The Orders of the Knights of Christ.
Christ, yeah. And so it's basically it's the same thing, the same people, the same ideology, the same everything is the same. It's just the name and the symbol that change.
Okay.
So he got that. He got it, which was basically a victory both for the Templars and for the Kingdom of Portugal. That got
Founded, by the way.
he saved his best ally.
Okay.
Now, the interesting aspect is, as you can see, it's basically the same symbol with slight changes, but it's basically the same. Um, and basically, what happened during that time was that after they were outcast and outlawed by the Pope and received in Portugal, Portugal changed direction. The direction until then in the written history was to consolidate Christian presence and
Hmm.
Christian might in the Iberian Peninsula, to consolidate, what had been reconquered, so the Reconquista, and it turned to technological development on the particular branches that would allow 2 centuries later for the exploration of the sea. And it wasn't just technological, it was also in terms of infrastructure and knowledge, in the sense of how to navigate and how to interpret a map, how to do everything in the sense of sea exploration,
Yep.
but also in terms of the raw materials. One of the first things that Don Dinis did was to plant, to order the sowing or the planting. I don't know how you call it, of the pine tree forests here in Portugal,
Oh.
that 2 centuries later would be used as wood for the caravels and the ships that would sail. So he knew very well there was a plan in the long run. And again, we're talking about written history as a narrative,
Yeah,
how
as
I'm
they give
very
us. Yeah, as
as
they
they
give
give
us.
us.
Yeah.
Right. So what can be seen is that at this point, everything began to be prepared, and 2 centuries later, they set off with, modern, for the time, modern ships, modern cannons, everything, modern knowledge of navigation,
Mm.
everything that they needed to quickly establish themselves, first in North Africa, and later on India and Brazil. So the hand of the Templars is clearly evident here, because when we see that they had been established and were doing this, a very important figure in Portuguese history arose, which is Henry, Prince Henry, that is called Henry the Navigator.
Okay, yeah, I've heard. I think he even came to Canada, or I'm thinking about someone else.
No, he never. He actually never saw the fruition
Okay.
of his plans. So he was the thinker behind this. He went only as far as Ceuta, Ceuta in Morocco now.
Okay.
I don't know what's the modern Arabic name, but
Yeah, it is
um,
still the same name.
it
Septa in
is
Arabic. Yeah, still the
okay.
same. Yeah.
All right. So, which is basically the northernmost part of Morocco. It's like a small cape, a small like extension of land that goes almost unites with Spain.
All right.
Um,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, and so he went only as far as that. And Henry the Navigator won. He wasn't the heir to the throne. He was only the brother to the heir,
Mhm.
but he excelled apparently in the Battle of Ceuta, and he was the one that was able to actually conquer the fortress.
Oh.
It was under his command. When all else failed, he was the one that stepped forward and managed to see it through. And so he caught the attention of the Templars, and he was immediately recruited. And they saw the potential in him, and basically must have instructed him on everything that the order had, because he established schools of navigation. He, did a lot of infrastructure, a lot of preparation under his rule. He died before things actually came into fruition, like I said.
Mhm.
But so he never actually went there. He never saw the fruits of, or the complete fruits of his
But
endeavors.
he was the mastermind, is what you're
But he
saying.
was, yeah, he
Oh.
was the mastermind and the guy that prepared everything, both technologically, in terms of scientific knowledge to navigate, and also
The
military
engineering
preparation.
of the ships and all that, and the
Correct. Yeah,
Armada. Yeah.
yeah. And so the Templars were always there, and to the point that I observed that Portugal would not exist without the Templars. So it can be said that Portugal is a Templar country for sure. And when we look even at modern history, I mean, Portugal was kept out of the two world wars. Yeah, in World War I, we sent one small platoon or something like that. It was like 40 guys or something to World War I. And World War II was completely left out.
How about
So
the Spanish Civil War? What was Portugal's situation when General Franco and all that was
mhm.
happening?
Yeah, well, the Portuguese were sympathetic to Franco, but never got directly involved.
Oh, okay.
And there was even a lot of refugees that that would come to Portugal, cross the border, come to Portugal,
Oh.
and manage to evade Franco that way.
Hmm.
So there was always a sort of stance of negotiation. Let's say it was always kind of merchant. Our culture was always kind of merchant, and even when you look at the immigration of Portuguese all over, and you have several there in Canada.
Yeah.
Um, it was always a very merchant kind
Hmm.
of culture that established business, focused on that,
Hmm.
managed to integrate well, managed to win the sympathies and so on and so forth. And in Portuguese history, there are several instances of this type of mentality that would be able to play both sides, never really take one or the other, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, and again, I reinforce the idea that Portugal must be, for sure, in its inception, a Templar country. So it was a sort of
They have,
occult country per se. Yeah.
yeah, they have a few of these. Let's call them occult countries, like Switzerland. Everyone talks about,
Mhm.
neutral Switzerland, but
Mhm.
just from the way you describe it, seems Portugal was even more, because Switzerland, as neutral as it was during the World Wars, it, its neutrality it was basically it being um, it was selling arms and financing both
Mhm.
sides.
Mhm.
But the way you're describing Portugal, it basically was literally neutral, except for a few uh, military, a little bit of a military aid that it provided. It sounds like it was even more neutral than Switzerland. But yeah, uh,
But
all over the world.
it helped both sides as well. In World War II, there was assistance to the Allies and assistance to Germany and to the Axis, let's say. And that, for example, there are mines up north, in the north of Portugal, that have an important metal that the German industry needed for the war effort. That is tungsten,
Hmm.
and those mines were allowed by the Portuguese government to be explored by the Germans, with the idea of remaining outside. We'll let you mine the metals that you need, and you leave us alone. And then with the Allies was okay, we'll provide this assistance or that, and you leave us alone. It was always a game being played
Like a
of
quid pro quo.
right, yeah, and yeah.
Another thing I noticed is, out of all the imperial powers, the European powers, like they say Portugal, was the first empire, then it declined and all that. And, in the modern era, Portugal is not really all that big country. Like
Mhm.
Brazil, its former colony, you know, uh, dwarfs it by,
A lot.
a lot.
Yeah.
But if you notice, the Portuguese were the last to give up their colonies in Africa, like
Yeah.
Mozambique and Angola. These
Hmm.
became independent in the 70s.
Yeah.
All the other African countries became independent earlier, in 1960 in particular.
Hmm.
But Portugal and Zimbabwe, which is a special case, we covered that. But Mozambique, Angola, well into the 70s, they were still a Portuguese possession. So that I found that very interesting.
Yes, and even earlier on, decades before that, we had the English ultimatum with the colonies. So that
Okay.
was something. Yeah, that was something that was already an attempt to dissolve the colonial power of Portugal, which was sea based entirely. As you know, the landmass of Portugal is very small, and so the empire was mostly, of course, abroad, and that's where the wealth and the power of Portugal came from. So the attempts of doing that were continuously there. Eventually, the monarchy was toppled. Supposedly, the king was assassinated, and in 1910, the republic was established, and we had a period of chaos. Then Salazar, which came to be known as,
The dictator,
you know,
right?
the dictator, yes,
Yeah.
came to power and basically kept on the same idea of playing the game, because he went through, like I said, the Second World War. He played this give and take game, the quid pro quo, like you
Mhm.
said, and managed to sort of navigate. I mean, we were always in the culture of navigation in the sea, but also in political affairs.
Mhm.
So and when I say we, of course, it's not necessarily me as
Yeah, a
a
citizen of
Portuguese now.
Portugal
Yeah,
has, just like a citizen in the US or in
right.
Canada, we really have no say in the politics.
Yeah.
As much as they try to make democracy seem participatory and all that,
Hmm.
no, we're spectators
Yeah.
in the street.
Uh, so yeah, the Portugal managed to maintain until late in modern times that power. I see in the chat someone mentioning Lusitania. That's absolutely correct.
Mhm.
Before all this, there was a particular tribe of Visigoths. In fact, I think they weren't Visigoths. They were different kind, but I forget now the designation. That
Vandals?
were no, no, no. It's a. It'll come to me.
No.
Anyway, they were, of course, Germanic in nature and culture,
Okay.
and they managed to resist Rome to a large extent until eventually were conquered. And the story says that it was by treason, etc. But um, yes, in the foundational principle, let's say, of the people of northern Portugal, and I repeat, northern Portugal, because there's a big difference between the people of northern Portugal and the people of southern Portugal, which has a lot of Moorish influence
Right.
and
North
Moorish
is
blood.
Galicia and so on, right? And south is like Coimbra and
Yeah. From Coimbra down, from Coimbra south to the south, you already see a difference. Of course, nowadays everything is mixed, but you used to see a big difference. And in the really northern regions of Portugal, you basically are, except for the language. If it wasn't for the language, you would say you would be in early Germanic,
okay.
populations. Blondes, blue eyes,
More
etc.
northerly, yeah, Nordic.
Northern, yeah, yeah, and even the music and the culture is very very Germanic. Of course, the designation Celtic doesn't do it justice, because Celtic is a sort of blanket term for a lot of cultures. But it's the same thing as saying Arab, right? There are
Yeah.
many Arabs.
They're blonde
So
Arabs, black Arabs, and all in between. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
and so yeah.
speaking of the etymology,
Mhm,
we mentioned this in private, but
mhm,
the origin of the word Portugal, there's an Arabic correlation or origin story, but I also heard of another one. See, in Arabic, Portugal or
mhm,
Al Portugal is the word for citrus fruit like
mhm,
oranges, clementines, tangerines. They're called Portugal, right? And Portugali is orange. The color orange is called Lone Portugali, right?
mhm, mhm,
Now, I also heard that yeah, Portugal is named after the Arabic word for citrus or orange, but I also heard that it is from Port Occult, or the port of the Gauls, like the seaport or the Gallic or the Gaelic people, the Celts. So the
mhm.
port
Yeah.
of the Celt
Mhm.
of the Celtic nation. So
Yes.
it's either that or that is an explanation for the word Portugal and Portuguese. What's your take on that?
Yes, the I think that the most accurate one is the one about the port, because the main city historically back then was Porto, which
Portugal,
means
right?
port.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that that would be considered the port of the Gauls, the port of that people. So that was the main seaway gate, let's say, to from those peoples.
Hmm.
So it would seem that that is the origin. I think that the association with the fruits in Arabic
Hmm.
came later on because of the explorations. Because one of the things that the Portuguese would do would be to plant orange and other citrus fruits
I was
trees.
gonna say because look at what
Yeah,
they did in Brazil.
right.
Plantation,
Yeah.
like coffee and all that, right? Yes.
Yes, but they would plant citrus in particular because it would give them, it would ease their journeys in the sea.
Oh
If
yes,
we take,
curvy. Yeah,
yes, if we take
the vitamin
that
C.
everything had to be salted when they arrived in a port, they would need to consume a lot of citrus to make up for it.
Yeah,
So
because
that's why
lack
they
of
would
vitamin
plant.
C was a huge problem for sailors.
Yeah,
Like a
yeah,
huge problem.
in according. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, the going back to the original subject,
Hmm.
the hands of the Templar are all over the foundation, the expansion, the maintenance of Portugal, and then the discoveries or the colonial, let's say, parts of the expansion of Portugal, for sure, in my opinion. Yeah.
Now, this is kind of tangential, but also
Hmm.
related. You showed me a very interesting image, and this
You want to
is
go there?
yeah. I want to jump straight to the scary stuff. Well, scary if you're closed-minded, but it's really good to have an open mind about these things. Once you're, a professional skeptic like we become. But check this out. This is uh, an image of a city in Asia called Judea. And Judea is the capital of Siam circa 1662. So Siam is modern day Thailand, Bangkok and company. So what is a city called Judea? Keep in mind there was the letter J is a recent mutation, you might say. Like there's no J sounding words in that reference Jewish or Judaic before the 1700s for some strange reason. So what's your take on this? Uh, like this is I never knew about this before you showed me.
Yes, yes, it intrigued me as well, and it's in records supposedly of the time
Hmm.
that the for the Europeans that city was the capital was called Judea, and the kingdom was called Siam, which of course has a phonetic relationship with Sion or Zion in English,
Yeah,
and
that's a good one.
yeah,
Good
and
note.
so it's intriguing. Now, the what strikes me the most about the this image is that when I saw it, I remember seeing it similarly elsewhere. And so I looked, and I found that it's very similar to the depictions of the old Byzantium and Constantinople that later became Istanbul. Now, if you put up the drawing of Byzantium, of the old Byzantium, the old
Oh yeah, let
Constantinople,
me
yeah.
pull that up. You showed me a really interesting. Here it is. This
Mhm,
is a depiction of Istanbul from the middle, or Constantinople, sorry, from
mhm,
that that timeline.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it would the similarities. Of course, this is an artist's rendition. It's not exactly the same, but the similarities were enough for me to wonder. Right
Mhm.
now, as you know, the old name for Constantinople before it was renamed was Byzantium,
Exactly.
which gave name to the Byzantine Empire. Right,
Hmm.
and there's a city in France called Besançon,
Here's the image
uh,
of it.
right, called Besançon, that has, um, and this is a modern photograph of it, that has a similar shape, as we can see
Yeah,
here.
look, this shape here resembles
Yeah,
this shape. Yeah,
yeah,
I see it. I see the
it's
same.
similar to both drawings or both paintings, right? So one would be Constantinople, a completely different area of the world. The other one would be in Siam, so nowadays Thailand, so completely different area of the world, but it's basically the same depiction, of course, with little differences. It depends on the skill of the drawer and all that. And so the intriguing thing that eventually emerged is, what if we are looking at history misplaced, in the sense of the locality itself is completely misplaced. Now,
Hmm.
either if this is to, we're just completely in speculative areas here, so don't ask me for evidence because I have none. What if either the original Byzantium was in the Far East,
Hmm.
or if the original Byzantium was in Eastern France? Because if that was to be the case, then everything changes, in the sense of we are reading a story that is local and that was expanded,
Hmm.
or we are reading a story that is far more expansive, that was contracted, right?
Yeah, it's either or.
Either or.
Hmm.
And also, if we are to take that into consideration, it means that the whole story about the nowadays Jerusalem is imposed upon it. It has no, it's not native to the region, right? And why do I say this? Because if whether Constantinople, Byzantium was in France or in the Far East, Jerusalem couldn't be in the same place. So it couldn't relate to the same distances and the same, um, let's say, geography as it does now.
Hmm.
So why then, right? Why would this? What would be the interest of doing that? Well,
What's the end game? Yeah.
yeah, the best means to hide the true history of something is not necessarily to falsify the history in its entirety, but to use the history that is already there and misplace it, right?
Hmm.
If you say that, the history of this country, um, uh, is in fact the history of this other country, right?
Yeah.
You're
That they
able
just
to,
relying on a script, but they just change up the locations, but it's the same script, the
it's the
same.
same thing.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, correct. And one of the observations that we do see in historical records, and hence my um, hesitance with written historical records, is
Mhm.
that we find several patterns that repeat itself in different locations over and over, right?
Absolutely.
And these patterns, if we look at it from a probabilistic perspective, it would be very hard for them to repeat themselves over and over organically, right?
Hmm.
So the best conclusion there would be it was somehow falsified, either entirely written, or the same pattern of the same history was placed over different locations, and then you mix it up a little bit to make a sort of coherence. I don't know
Now,
if you remember. Sorry.
no, no, go ahead. Yeah. Do I remember?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember a comment I left recently in one of your videos about a virtual chess game. Um,
Remind me.
yeah, that the history, even nowadays, that we see
Okay.
developing
Yes.
nowadays is a virtual. chess game, a virtual reality of sorts, provided by media input
Correct.
that forms in the minds of the masses an idea of what is, right? Forms, it sort of solidifies culturally an idea of what is, but it's merely a virtual reality. It's merely a an idea of an ideology, let's say a conveying of an ideology that is imposed upon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we actually look at our immediate reality, we do not see a correlation between one and the other. We do not see, the same patterns in our daily lives repeating over and over, except for patterns that have to do with completely individual situations. But that's a different matter altogether. We're going into spirituality there.
Mm-hmm.
But in the sense of organic social living, we do not see the same patterns. We only see them in the mentality that is imposed upon, right? For example, when we have this idea that, oh, man always causes war.
Mm-hmm.
Man can't be at peace. It's impossible. It's in human nature to be at war, right? This
We are a
idea,
violent animal, or something like that.
right? Yeah, this idea, I think, comes from the outside. It comes from external sources that do provide that background. If we look at written history, and if we were to take it as absolute fact, then yes, we can say that man is a creature of war. Constant conflict, and always seeking to conquer and do harm, and etc.
Mm.
And this is just an example, but perhaps in our daily lives, social lives, we look around and we don't exactly necessarily confirm that. Yeah, there are violent people, of course. There always were, and there will always be violent people, but it's not the rule per se, right? So the this imposition of a virtual reality may extend back in the past, and if these histories, whether they were factual in the sense that they happened or not, right? They can be completely made up.
Mm-hmm.
They were put in these locations for a reason, for to give it a background. And I do think that this is actually the same occult hand
Mm-hmm.
that is nowadays doing the same through much more developed media, right? Which involves TV and internet and all these TikToks and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So and even YouTube that we're using.
Even this
So
year.
so it's something to consider. Again, we're in completely speculation area, and don't ask me for proof of this because it's completely speculative. But you decided to go there, so I went.
No, no, this is exactly what we need to hear because um, it makes sense when you think about the Reconquista in Iberia
Hmm.
and just transfix the dynamic that happened there, the Muslims fighting the Christians,
Hmm.
into the Holy Land. And
Yeah.
they also, believe it or not, they also did it in another place, uh, the Horn of Africa. They had Reconquista there involving the Ethiopians fighting against
Yeah.
Muslim, their surrounding Muslim, the lowland coastal Muslim
Mhm.
entities, right? Which is today Sudan and Somalia and so on. And I found a lot of correlations. There was a left-handed Moorish sultan fighting against the Iberians, and then there was a
Mhm.
left-handed Muslim in Ethiopia,
Mhm.
but he's the hero of the Somali people and so on. His name is Ahmed Gurey, Ahmed the left-handed, and he was fighting against the Christian Abyssinian Empire, right?
Mhm.
So I always find like correlations there has to be more. Like we in our private conversation, we talked about Vienna, the
Yeah.
siege of Vienna,
Hmm.
and I mentioned how there's a lot of similarities between the story about the Ottomans, the Uthmaniyun, the Turkish siege of Vienna, and Attila the Hun and his
Yep.
siege of Rome, right? The Hun
Hmm. Hmm.
and the Turks both came from Asiatic domains and were like a horde conquering Europe, going west, and they laid siege, and they were this close to destroying with the Huns Rome and with the Turks, you know, Christendom, or
Yeah.
the Austro-Hungarians, and but it's the same. And then they finally there was a plague, the Justinian plague, when the Huns were doing that, and then there was the Black Death when the
Yeah.
Ottomans were doing it. So there was a pandemic, same script.
Yes, and you referred to Ethiopia, and someone here on the chat is also referring to
Oh, let me see.
Ethiopia. And Ethiopia was the lands of Prester John, right? So,
I wanted, yes,
which
I wanted to cover.
which was a myth, a Templar myth.
Yes.
So it was a myth that far into the east, there
Hmm.
was this Christian kingdom that had a lot of power and a lot of wealth that would surely need to be united with the Christian kingdoms of the West. So yes, of course, if we take it as more than a hoax, but again, yes, the idea of the repetition of these patterns gives us something to wonder about. It's the same patterns that we see now with, I mean, predictive programming, concurrent programming, whatever, and we see right before our eyes in our contemporary lives. And the if we apply this to the historical records and we look for the correlations of these patterns, then we see that something doesn't add up. I mean,
Hmm.
it couldn't be a repetition, like you said about the left-handed command. Yeah, well, what are the odds? I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't have been, but it's one of those things that make you wonder, right?
Yeah, the odds are just
Um,
not, yeah, not normal.
and so
So here there's a
the yeah.
map of Prester John's kingdom, and it's supposedly the Horn of Africa, East Africa.
Yeah, yeah, Ethiopia. Yeah, and apparently, again, hoax or myth or whatever, but apparently one of the Portuguese explorers actually met Prester John, the king of Ethiopia. At the time, his name was Iskander,
Oh,
which I think is a form of Alexander. I think
yes, yeah.
um,
Egypt's Alexandria in Arabic is Iskandariya. So yeah,
Iskandria. Yeah.
yeah.
So he met the king, but wasn't supposedly allowed to leave. He couldn't report back.
Oh, he
All
was.
he could do was give tell his story to travelers, and the travelers spread the idea. Of course, this was what is said
Mhm,
of it. But there were expeditions from Portugal, so again from the Templars, to find this lost king. There's a lot of correlations as well. For example, in the name Brazil.
Brazil.
Brazil is a name that comes from an old Irish origin, so Druidic in nature, Celtic. Celtic, like I said, is a blanket term, so it shouldn't be used really, but it comes from the same pagan ideas. And at the time, it was called High Brazil, so HY Brazil, and
Oh,
it was a mythical island um, uh, on visible from Ireland, which is where the gods came. Right, the gods came from that island, and it was a mythical island. Of course, it's a reference to Atlantis,
found it.
because the island then disappeared, and um, so when the Portuguese, again Templars, discovered the land supposedly in what is now Brazil, what did they decide to name it? Brazil, right?
Brazil.
So, the long lost island of the
Yeah.
gods. So there are a lot of this type of correlations that we find, and it is, again, like I've shown in the beginning with the sigil, the symbol of the Templars. I think that there was guidance from, I called them, I call it an egregore technology. This was something that was supposedly rediscovered by
Mm.
John Dee and later on by others that picked up on the same work. And it comes from an older, much older, source of creating. I know. Well, I know that you and your audience are Muslim, so I don't want to,
We
say
have a
something
lot of
that.
non-Muslim listeners too. Go right
Okay,
ahead.
yeah, which is, I mean, I know that you may consider that the, what is called your denomination of demons were there, but
Hmm.
I think that that type of demon
Hmm.
is a creation, is a technological creation.
Okay.
To do so, when I say technological, is in a ritualistic way, to amass vital energy, so amass attention, and with the amassed attention, you create what later became known as an egregore, which is an amalgamation of an entire will and desire of a group of people that give it their energy. And through their worship, it keeps that egregore alive. And the egregore then regulates and does what it's programmed to do. So, if, for example, you create an egregore to save, you ritualistically create an egregore to, for example, save and enhance a certain people, right?
Hmm.
And if you then um, create, a sort of religious worship around symbols that you can even say that they relate to something else, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
But if the people actually focus and worship those symbols, then they can be feeding that egregore, and by being open to it, they are controlled
Buy it.
by that egregore and act in the fulfillment of whatever it was programmed to do. And again, I say programmed because the egregore does not have a will of its own in the organic sense, right? It
Hmm.
does not have free will in that sense. It's like you program a computer program to do something, right, in automatic, right?
Hmm.
And what happens is that the computer program to run, it needs an operating system, it needs all these things, an actual hardware, a computer, it needs electricity, etc., etc. So this is the worship part, right? And it gives it energy and the ability to then put into place the plan that was originally created to do. But it's, again, merely programmed to do. It can't be reasoned with, or we can't choose something else. And I think that that is the actual origin of demons, which is different from shadows or
Jinn
reflections.
and reflections
Yes,
and yeah.
uh, that is different. But the actual demon, in the sense of as we see a depiction of it, I think is more is closer to the egregore idea, and I think that the Templars were all about that.
The way you're describing this uh, egregore technology, the internet, and
Mhm.
our addiction to internet, uh, and the whole internet world we're in is the pinnacle of this of this power generation, don't you think? Like they
Mhm.
reached the pinnacle with this, with what we're using.
Yes. Well, there's I think that they are trying to rebuild something. I think that that's what the egregore is about. That
Mm,
is the original instruction that the egregore was given, is to assist over a long period of time, over cross generations, assist in the recreation, in rebuilding something that was lost.
mm,
And for example, I remember also watching one of your videos where you talk about Tartaria, right? And you say, well, the real Tartarians were different people, etc. And as you know, it became a sort of uh, conspiracy term, or whatever you want to call it, a fashion term, to talk about Tartaria, about the old technologies, etc., etc. You're familiar with it, I'm sure.
yeah.
And I think that there is in the association of the architecture of these monuments,
Hmm.
there is something there that is discovered. What I disagree with, and I've even done a video on it called Old Worlds on my channel, is that even if we are to assume that there was this old, highly advanced technologically civilization, and I repeat, highly advanced technologically, it does not mean that it was highly advanced morally or
Well said.
ethically, right? So and I mean, we when I went to some Templar sites here in Portugal,
Mm.
and I went there recently with my good friend Silas from Scotland, whom I would suggest that you subscribe also to his channel.
Oh yes, a lot of people in the server are subscribed to Silas, and
Yeah.
they always share his videos. He's a great speaker. I listen to him a lot. I'm
Oh,
already
he's
subscribed. I'm already subscribed.
yeah, he's a great guy, and he also became a good friend. And we went there together
Oh
physically to
wow,
these. Yeah,
what a small world! I
to,
didn't have any idea you knew Silas or were in real life friends. It's a small world.
yes, yes. And so we went to these sites recently. It was in August, and we were amazed by what we saw, by the symbology, but also by the architecture and how this architecture was completely misplaced. I mean, the surrounding buildings had nothing to do. I mean, we're talking about buildings that supposedly were built afterwards. So supposedly you had better technology, right?
Yeah,
And the buildings that were built afterwards were worse. I mean, completely more primitive than the buildings at the core that were supposedly
the
the first ones.
foundational. Yeah, the foundational
Right.
buildings are super advanced, and
Yeah.
then every layer, the work is shoddier and lower quality. Lower quality is what you're saying.
Yes. Yes. And so, what is there is that there was something that unified the world
Mm.
technologically, which does not mean that it was unified culturally, because the way to maintain power is to always have conflicting cultures or
Oh,
religions
right.
or
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah,
that's what they
and
do. Yeah.
yeah, and so even if it was unified technologically, we cannot, and this is the error that the people who look into what is called Tartaria, it doesn't matter the name that we give it, to look that look into these old worlds,
Mm.
is to assign to them, well, if the world now is worse in moral terms, it means that back then it was, the paradise. It was like excellent, and it
Yeah.
was stolen. Of course, the first question that I would ask is, well, if it was perfect back then, how did it fall? Because something that is perfect doesn't fall, right?
Good point.
Also, what makes you think that technological advancement equates to moral advancement?
Mm,
I don't
yeah.
I don't see the correlation, because we can certainly see some branches of technological development going on in our lifetimes, and
Yeah.
they do not equate with moral development at all, right?
Yeah.
Quite
And a
quite
lot of
the
them
contrary
opposite.
sometimes.
Exactly. Like we were just talking about how they're going to legislate medically assisted suicide.
Yeah.
A lot of,
Yeah.
and obviously you need technology. They're coming up with all these suicide capsules and devices to, you know, kill you cleanly or painlessly. But the whole premise of taking a life because it's unsustainable or something, I think that's a barbaric, savage mindset.
Mhm.
So uh, even if you have the technology to do it, I think it's barbaric to go there. So I agree, man.
Yes, and there are other questions that arise. Okay, so you have, one of the presentations would say, for example, oh, there was free energy,
Mm,
and there was free this, free that, free the other. And what I would, ask would be, okay, and what is the price of that free energy? You would have to be a citizen. What is the price to be a citizen? What would you have to give or do to become a citizen, right? Maybe it was to, be implanted with something. Maybe it was to accept a certain type of behavior, a certain
mhm.
type of culture that you didn't want to accept. But you did it for the material comforts and for
Sorry for that.
all the things that to have access to all the technological things that civilization had to offer. So I think actually that what they call Tartaria, old worlds, whatever
Hmm.
name you want to give it, is what these groups of people want to reconstruct through this virtual reality inculcation and sort of chess game being performed. They want us to feed and to give life to something that was lost for them in the past, right?
Uh-huh. And you think Atlantis and
Mhm.
all these other ancient lost worlds, civilizations, cultures is the same thing, the same uh, formula, the Tartaria and the Like to me,
Mhm.
I remember when nobody was talking about Tartaria, but everybody was talking about Atlantis. I still remember in my childhood, Atlantis was the
Mhm.
so
Yeah, 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 for sure. And Atlantis is the blueprint. Let's say it's the mythical blueprint,
blueprint. Yeah.
which of course relates to High Brazil. And again, it's not a coincidence that Brazil was called Brazil after there was High Brazil in the myths. So it was completely not voluntary. That I mean, it was on purpose that Brazil was named that way, and there was already a sign in the occult, let's say circles, that the plan was being developed, that the plan was being implemented and being placed. Let's say.
Hmm.
So I do think that the myth of Atlantis does correlate with what later, nowadays became known as Tartaria, but even before you could call it Babylon, the mythical Babylon,
Right.
not
Right. Yeah.
which would be, this civilization that tried to be more than God and so on and so forth.
Tower of
So
Babel and all that. Yeah.
right, so I think that this all correlates in one way or another. Of course, the myth serves the purpose of directing the actual the actual direction of culture, right? And so, if you are able to implant these myths, which I consider them hoaxes,
Hmm.
not myths, because to me, myth has to do with something true. But that's a different discussion altogether. Um, you are able to then direct culture in a certain type of direction, right? To be able to accept and gradually approach what you want to be, and
Hmm.
this is done ritualistically. And one of the things that you certainly heard yesterday when you joined that
That's
very
Muslim.
interesting, yeah,
Yes.
that very interesting call. It was a private call.
Yes.
Um, was that the ritualistic repetition of what is being done. It's repetition, repetition, repetition. The patterns repeat and repeat and repeat. Why? Because they need to be fed. It's like a computer program, you know.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
computer, when you play a video game, right? The video game is always the same in the sense that, you control this character or whatever
Hmm.
always in the same way, right? The repetition of the game, level 1, level 2, whatever it is. And you play it over and over and over and over, and you give your attention to the video game, thus giving it a life that does not organically have, right? If you move away, if you do not play the game does not exist, right? It only exists while it's being played, right? And so the repetition serves the purpose. I mean, in the same way, why, for example, you as a Muslim, why do you pray every day, right?
Yeah.
You pray
I,
every day to repeat and inculcate something that you want to inculcate in yourself, right? You decide and you prefer to inculcate that ideology, behavior, whatever, so that you achieve a certain state. It's the same in what I'm talking about. The repetition serves the same purpose. It's a kind of worship that inculcates an ideology, a way of thinking, to produce a result later on. And it's done through a complete virtualization of perception. And that's the main function of media is
mhm.
make a virtual reality for us to live on.
And then repeat their tropes over and over in different formats, in children's cartoons, in movies, and in their
Mhm.
news stories. They have a few set of tropes they want to repeat, like you said,
Mhm.
uh, feeding into their program egregore. And what do you think was the media of 500 years ago? I would say it was the church, where they
Mhm.
would listen to sermons, and they'd have the same sermon in different towns, uh, maybe even in different languages. Well, no, they were all speaking Latin and vulgar Latin, but y- y- before the newspapers, before the radio
Mhm.
broadcast, it was the church and
Yes.
sermons, and I
Yes.
think that's how they used.
Yes, and it was a repetition because
Yeah.
you had to
Yeah.
every day pray and every Sunday go to church and so on and so forth. So whether we consider that the technological placement was less advanced back then, or that you consider there was more advanced even,
Mm,
and that they want to reconstruct it, that's completely aside. Because going back to a bit of that speculation, the misplacement of the historical records also implies that time was extended, right?
mhm.
So what we would call ancient would probably be just a few hundred years ago. And that means that everything may have been, may again have been very different.
Now,
Um,
you
mhm,
are reminding me of Fomenko and his whole skepticism with our timeline. He
mhm,
basically thinks the Dark Ages is bullshit, didn't
mhm,
exist. A 1,000 years extra has been added to the
yes.
calendar. What's your take on Fomenko? Let me pull him up.
No. Yeah, well, Fomenko, I agree with the detection of the patterns. I think Fomenko, being a statist, I can't say the word, uh, someone who works with statistics.
Oh, a statistician, yeah. And he
Yeah,
was also a Soviet shill, right? He was shilling
yeah,
for the Soviet
yes,
Union.
yes, yes. But the detection of patterns is something that is self-evident.
Hmm.
And that's the only part that I agree with. The rest is just Russian centric and
Right.
goes completely off course. And every lie has to have a bit of the truth, otherwise it doesn't work. It doesn't stick.
Hmm.
So the part about detecting those patterns in history is the important part. That if this repeats over and over, in historical records. And what is the probability of that? If you see that the probability is very low, then it was most probably forged. It was most probably fake.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the idea behind that. Now, do I subscribe to Fomenko? No,
No.
because Fomenko then goes off on a very different direction. He tries to manipulate this evident fact into constructing another different ideology to steer, let's say, attention elsewhere. But yeah, Fomenko has that importance of the detection of the patterns, and also an important aspect that we also talked about previously off the record was John Laban's work
Right.
about
John LeBron. Let me pull him up.
yeah, who did a very important research on the sources for ancient history, and he found that these sources did not go back past books that were at most 300 years old or so. So, where do these books that are 300 years old get the sources for things that supposedly happened 1,000, 2,000 years ago or more, right? So it's all based on detection of these things, and once we are alert to the patterns in our current times that we see in media, we can also be alert to the patterns that we detect in written history. And this, of course, does not mean that we all draw the same conclusions. That is, like I've told you in our first conversation or first exchange, I think that agreement is overvaluated.
Mm-hmm.
People think that they, for me to deal with this person, I have to completely agree. No, that is complete nonsense. We're all individuals. We all have our own or supposedly we all have our own minds, we all have our own free will
Opinions, free
and
will. Yep.
opinions and so on. And disagreement is actually a healthy thing because it allows one and the other to discuss something, and maybe something that neither one nor the other had realized yet comes out of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that he did, John Laban. Now that you're showing the
His website,
website,
correct.
yeah,
His
there's
web-
an article there where he goes in. That is an article freely and publicly available,
oh,
where
okay.
he discusses the um, ancient history sources, and that was a very interesting analysis that he did, and he went into the bibliography, so the sources that each book gives, and he found that
Where I
they
can
were.
find that in his website, Armin?
That's a good question. If you search for
Okay, you know what? I'll figure through his website while you keep talking. Didn't want to interrupt you, make you juggle stuff. I'll do it. I'll
yeah.
I'll find
Uh,
it. But
and so he eventually found that the sources became circular after a point, which is like, you have this book that points to this book, and this other book points to the first one, right? So they are both the sources of each other,
it's like
and none
circular.
circular,
Mhm.
and none goes past that. So of course that's very suspicious.
Mm,
Where are these ancient sources, ancient manuscripts, and all that you say this came from?
mhm.
And so that was a very important contribution. If you like, I can ask him. If you
You
don't
know what?
find it, I
Please.
can ask
Yeah,
John Laban,
yeah.
and you can post it in the post in the show
I'll,
notes. And yeah,
I'd appreciate that.
yeah,
Okay, Armin. One thing I wanted to ask you, if you do you think there was a scripted aspect with the decline of Portugal? Like, it just went from being, um, a pivotal imperial realm, and now it's just this tiny country. What's the population of Portugal? 10 million,
yeah, around that. Yes.
around that, right?
Mhm.
And if you go to Portugal, like, it is, you could tell it's developed European realm. It's part of the EU. It's in NATO. I think it was a founding member of NATO. So it's a
Hmm.
first world country, but you know, it's not. It's not like you don't get the vibe that it's a former power and or something like that. So what do you think happened with the empire? It just in the 1970s all gone, and now Portugal is just this small country with uh, a
Yeah,
huge past. Like what's
yeah.
up with that?
It happened with Portugal, the same that happened more recently with the USA and
Mm,
with other sort of formally or informally imperial powers, which was they had their use,
mm,
they fulfilled their part of the plan, and then when it's no longer needed, a change comes into play, which does not necessarily mean that the contributions are forgotten in the sense, there has to be something in it for the participants, right? And so Portugal is more or less kept, um, eh, more or less a quiet place, where
mhm,
nothing major goes on, that kind of thing. It's left, there's still this culture of, a bit laissez faire.
mhm,
And so the continental Portugal now is merely, just a sort of, I think it's still a very important place for the Templars. Don't get me wrong. And I think that it will always be protected, especially because the Templars have here some holy sites for
mm.
them, particularly Sintra is very holy. And as you know, it was during a lot of time supposedly disputed with the Muslims.
Okay, right.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and it's a very holy place for them for sure. One of the reasons is that it has its own microclimate. I mean, you can have a sunny day and you look towards the mountains. This is a mountainous region. You look towards the mountains of Sintra and you see clouds only above that region, for example. So um, it's got a lot to it, and I think they will preserve what is holy to them in Portugal. But in terms of an empire, a country per se, it suffers the same change as all the other empires. I mean, we see now the downfall of America.
mhm.
We are
Right.
witnessing it live. Let's say we are witnessing it day by day occurring, and that is because America already fulfilled its part. And once that is done, they can move on to the next stage. And so you demolish what you constructed, right? And you demolish, perhaps like we saw in 9/11, you
Mm,
demolish two poles and you construct a single pole,
right.
right?
And
Um,
yeah, the whole 9/11 thing is also like a very, you know, there's a whole rabbit hole we can go there.
mhm,
And, uh, but sorry to cut you off. You said something very interesting about the two pillars. I have a theory. Um, if you look at um, there's a Masonic aspect to the World Trade Tower, the Twin Towers,
mhm,
and the Masonic architecture. They place heavy emphasis on these two pillars called Joachim or Joachim
mhm. And
and
Boaz.
Boas. Yeah,
Mhm.
so I think it has some symbolism there, and you know, I don't know if I can pull up anything from memory, but I bet you there were similar twin tower type events in the past.
Mm. Yeah, because I think that again, it has to do with what we were talking about previously. In my opinion, this is my opinion, the
Okay.
reconstruction of this old civilization that was monolithic.
Mhm.
Call it Babel, whatever. Um, that was a single tower represent in the representation, right? It was in the actual symbolic nature. It was a single monolithic, monocephalous kind of society. And so the through basically what they were representing in 9/11 was from in a lower level, from the opposition of the two, you make one, right? So you demolish, you deconstruct the two, the Yakim and Boaz, and you make one out of it, which is the central pillar that reaches the heavens in their opinion and their mind.
Hmm.
So that I think is part of what that the egregore is programmed to do, and that was part of the plan. And I think that we are witnessing it. So the downfall of Portugal was completely imploded. It was completely demolished on purpose. You can see that even in the transition between monarchy and republic, you have the hand of the Carbonara, which was a secret
Like
society.
weren't they like also similar to a mafia kind
Yeah,
of? Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I've
yeah,
heard about them.
yeah. That vied to overthrow as many monarchies as they could and install republics.
Hmm.
So the even of course there are different. The official story for the flag, the current flag of Portugal, is very different. But coincidentally, and I say this with quotation marks, the colors of the Carbonara are red and green. And in the Portuguese flag, you see the Portuguese Republican flag.
Is
You
red and green,
see the red and green. Yeah.
but it used to
When
be
before
blue and white.
blue and white. Yes,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Let me find the. Here's the original Kingdom of Portugal flag. It's blue and white, and one thing. This is kind of off topic, but kind of on topic. You might laugh at this, but one thing about being a soccer or football fan
Mm,
is it helps you with geography and learning about countries. Uh, Portugal, the first time I learned about it having a blue and white flag was just deep diving on FC Porto.
mhm,
And the uniform of that soccer team, it's I think one of the bigger clubs in Portugal, is blue and
mhm.
white, and it's
Yeah.
based in the city Porto. So I looked into it, and then I realized, whoa, okay, so that's why they picked blue and white for this huge club. It has a monarchist type history. So, like, it's just an off topic there, but you get to learn about countries by being into soccer. So you're saying
Yeah.
the modern flag of Portugal and the Cabineri uniform, there is a correlation. The red and green colors isn't by accident. They chose that for Republican Portugal.
Yes, it's even accepted
Okay, very
in
strange.
mainstream records that the Carbonara was involved in the toppling of monarchy and the installation of the republic. That much is known. Of course, what isn't admitted is that the flag was based on the actual Carbonara colors. Let's take it as a coincidence, but
Mhm.
whatever whatever works. But
Funnily enough,
it's yeah.
Portugal was the
Mhm.
first true European power to colonize Africa. And the Pan African flags, their colors are very similar. It's
Mhm.
green, gold, and red. Even Ethiopia has the same color scheme: red, green, and gold. Like
Oh,
if you,
right. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
so
Very interesting. Yeah.
like, and even the Rastafarians, right? They have this
Mhm.
color scheme, the red, green, and gold. So I
Yes,
just
and
found that
Morocco is red with the green star, isn't it?
Yes, Morocco,
Yeah,
the Kingdom of
yeah,
Morocco, it has a
hmm
green star on a red canvas. You're right.
right, yeah, yeah. So it was clearly imploded in that sense, and I think that what we are witnessing now in the world is a deconstruction of another empire and the preparation of the next. If it is needed to move forwards next steps of the plan. What
Hmm.
I would like to emphasize is that, in my view, these steps do not equate to a physical organic reality. These steps are in a virtual reality where we are, it moves on our belief,
Hmm.
massified. You understand?
Yes.
The way it goes through its own stages is through the belief, and that's how the egregore works. It's as if, I don't know, the mythology in Islam, but it says, the demon cannot hurt you directly. It
Hmm.
can only convince you,
Hmm.
right? And so the this is exactly what's being played out, in my opinion. It's about convincing, to give power to this instead of that, to give your attention to this instead of that, to even do self harm. For example, like you were talking about the suicide thing. So it's
Yeah.
not like going there and outright killing someone. It's okay, if you want, you can
Yeah.
kill yourself here,
They make you
right?
sign a waiver and all sorts of
Right.
crazy paperwork.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So it's more about that, and I think that it is, in a way, and now we're going a bit more esoteric, if you like, but it's in a way a test of character,
Hmm.
for all of us, a test of our free will,
Hmm.
in the sense not that we can, because we are in that sense too small in terms of numbers to change the world. And I don't think that the idea is to change. I don't think that this is a battle to be won in the collective sense. You understand? I
Hmm.
think that this is a battle over fought within each and every one of us.
Hmm. A
It's a battle
personal,
that is
individual battle.
correct, an individual, um, a test that, puts you in situations of temptation and other types of situation where you have to choose,
Hmm.
and it has to do with the choice between something that is virtual and completely falsified, or something that you sense in your innermost self, in your true essential self, that
Hmm.
is the truth, even if you can't see it directly, because that is something different. Even if you can't see because of all the confusion and all the situations around you, you can't see the truth. You know at least what the truth is not, right? And
Right.
so if you see what the truth is not, you know that you can just individually put it aside, knowing that collectively, you probably won't make a difference. But the fight isn't, let's say, in a collective manner. To me, it's in an individual manner. It's about each and every one of us, going through the confrontation with these things, and then using free will and see what we come up with.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? That's the the proper definition of the Islamic concept jihad is how
Hmm.
you described it. It's like a personal battle or a individual struggle. The the jihad that people imagine, oh, you're fighting a holy war. That's like a tiny and the final aspect of jihad. The most important aspect of jihad is your personal battles and your personal struggles with uh, your quote unquote demons,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's what you like. If you have bad teeth, brushing your brushing your teeth every morning is a jihad.
Yes.
That's the true meaning of jihad.
Yes. Yes. Yes, I see. I see your point. Yeah, it would be equivalent in that regard. Of course, behind every institutionalized religion
Hmm.
is an essential spirituality. Of course, we do see a lot of corruption and a lot of misinterpretation and a lot of politicization in religions and institutionalized religions. And of course, Islam, Christianity, all of them, Buddhism, even
Hmm.
Hinduism, all of them have suffered from the same at an institutional level. But behind it, it's like I told you, for something to resonate, it has to have something true, right?
Hmm.
And behind it is something true. Of course, if you perhaps go to a more extreme population of Muslims
Hmm.
and talk about jihad, they won't even know about that aspect that you're talking about. They perhaps only focus
The holy war and that
on the
stuff.
holy war and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So it would be the same for Christians. You know, the Crusades. Oh, the Crusades were maybe in the origin of the Crusades was the same as the jihad. You know, fight your demons and then um,
It became
you
a
know you
military thing. Yeah.
right. So of course these things are used as tools by the manipulators, exactly because they resonate in some way. There's something that actually adds up, and therefore they work. You know,
Wow.
we can be prompted. We, not we, but you know, the masses can be prompted to action due to that resonance that it has. There's a certain, let's say, archetypal quality to these things that add up, and therefore we are able to identify with.
Yeah. So, Armin, I think we kind of covered for now all the stuff. We, unless you remember anything we went through in private that we didn't bring up in the stream, but I think we covered practically everything. If there are any questions, there's only a few people now in the chat, but if you have any questions for Armin, ask away. We've been live for close to 2 hours, and I think we've learned a lot. Uh, you know, if if uh, if it's no issue for you,
No,
you
not at all. No, I'm available to continue for the time
awesome.
that you deem
And
necessary. So that's fine.
this has been so wonderful for me. Uh, I will implore you to return and come back, and uh, maybe this can be a new thing, a series that we can go back and forth and cover a few other things. This was a very good historical deep dive into your country. A very important country in the world stage. Um, the Portuguese language, more people speak it outside Portugal. That's how you know a country or a culture has a pivotal um, standing in history. Is if they're if the native speakers are a minority. So Portugal is like that. England, UK is like that. Arabia is like that.
Hmm.
All these countries that are in their modern representation small, but they had a vast contribution to you know our reality today. And I think we
Yeah,
did good. We covered a lot of
yeah. If I could just add something
please.
in regards to the Reconquista,
Oh,
um,
let me pull that up. I think.
the um, part of what made the expansion of Portugal, especially in the against or in the conquest of Muslim territories,
Mhm.
and not just in the Reconquista, but also in other places, um, was that their captains that were sent according, again, to historical records, and we can't say for sure. But in the historical records, they had an utmost disdain and hatred for
Oh,
Islam. Yeah,
yes, yes.
to the extent of being outright barbaric in their military operations.
Like the
So,
Inquisition, the main target were Muslims, correct?
well,
Not
uh,
heretics per se. It was mostly Muslims, and then heretics,
yeah,
Jews, and all that. And
yeah. Well, that's in the historical records. That's debatable because we have
oh,
conflicting texts, but it has to do, I think, with sects that
okay,
wanted to make their point more important than the others.
okay, yeah.
But what I was trying to convey is that there
So
is this idea in the military expansion that when the Portuguese met a pagan or a different religion that wasn't Muslim, it was one thing. When that religion was Muslim, it was a completely different thing. And I see that there was this um, original, because it's when we conclude that Portugal was created by the Templars, it means that at its core this was a Templar thing. This this more than rivalry, this outright hatred towards Islam was a Templar thing at its core,
yeah,
and it must have had something to do. And again, we're taking historical records. It must have had something to do with something occult as well,
mm,
as you know very well, and you've also shown in some of your videos. The Muslim world was also involved in the same types of exercises of
100%.
um, creation of binds with what would be called demons and so on and so forth. So uh, it's as if um, it's as if there were times when the rivalry just got too extreme for some reason, and it was just too. It was too extreme, even. You understand?
Got it. Yeah.
Uh, to to the point of, for example, I'll give you an example. Even in historical records, there was, and that's why I said that the populations of north and south of Portugal were
Different.
at one point different, and even genetically different. Um, and when the Christians were to be able to conquer certain lands to the south,
Mm,
um, the populations that were already a mix. This wasn't pure blood populations by any stretch of the imagination. Um, would, after a period of time, there are several records of this,
mm.
state that, we would prefer to be under Muslim rule than Christian.
Wow.
Um, and and these were peoples that were not necessarily one or the other, right? And they would say that with giving the idea that, well, with the Muslims, we only had to, you pay the tribute, you pay the tax.
Yeah,
They always,
the jizya was very was kind of was really just a ceremonious payment. It wasn't
mm,
like the Muslim government treasury did not rely on jizya tax payments. It was more, if anything, it was more a performative thing to show your subjugation by
mhm,
Muslims. So it was there's an English word for it. It was a token. It was a token
right.
payment. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we just pay the tax that is due, and they leave us alone, and whatever,
Mm,
it's fine. With the Christians, we have to be Christians. We
right.
have to, we have to fulfill all those things, and we're, questioned about the faith, and we have to go to
And
church,
this,
and we have to show externally that we're Christians and that kind of thing.
wow.
So, there was something that I still am not decided, but that probably you, as a Muslim, can infer, or maybe you can discover, or maybe you and your chat can discover, is why there was this extreme sort of antagonism um, towards one with the other, but from the historical records that I know, because I didn't delve much into the Islamic world. Maybe you do see the contrary as well.
Mhm.
Is an extreme um, hatred, let's say, directed at particularly Islam.
Now, the highbrow discussions in the Arab world today, they
Mm,
consider the quote unquote war on terror and the neocons and all that. They consider it they consider it a continuation of the Crusades.
mm,
So I haven't deep dived like you bringing up their almost wild hatred uh, is making me curious. I need to deep dive into this, but uh, my opinion, my take is the same animus that's motivating a Zionist and
mm,
evangelical. What do they call them? Christian Zionists and
yes.
neocons today.
Mhm,
That animus, that sentiment, was manifest in Iberia. It had different names, different dynamic, but that emotion was there, right?
mm,
There was a neocon emotion, and then there was also a jihadist uh, response, or maybe vice versa. The jihadism might have triggered the neocon sentiment, but
mm,
that what we're seeing in Israel, Palestine today, and recently the last couple of days, the Lebanese theater. I think that was what the irrational hatreds that we are very it's clear as day to us in 2024. I think that's what it was back then, just in an Iberian, Spanish Portuguese setting.
mm, mm. Yeah,
The
yeah.
crusade
There
never
was.
ended.
Yeah, I actually think, since we have already speculated so much, but I actually think that um, the first, at least the first crusade, and even subsequent, but especially the first crusade, was for the Reconquista, and it wasn't anywhere near Jerusalem.
Wow. Yeah, that's a yeah, what they say, the green light for the crusade was through a papal bull, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Papal
yeah,
bullshit. I'm just saying, maybe that's why they called it the papal bull.
yeah,
Just a
yeah,
little
yeah,
pun word game.
yeah, and so that would mean that again, completely now. Disclaimer: we're completely now in the field of speculation. That
Absolutely.
would mean that probably the original Jerusalem was also closer to where I live now than nowhere near
Eastern
the
Mediterranean,
Middle East. Yeah,
Middle East.
yeah, yeah.
I remember Mark Twain, or yeah, it was Mark Twain. Mark Twain said when he visited the Middle East for the first time, and he saw the Jordan River and the Dead Sea and a lot of biblical sites, he
Hmm.
was so underwhelmed. Keep in mind, he was an American who grew up on the Mississippi River and everything, and he's like, man, after reading about all these biblical places and rivers and sites, it was so underwhelming, because the Jordan River that I saw was like, you couldn't even really call it a river. It
Yeah.
seemed more like a stream,
Yeah.
like the Mississippi. Now that's a river. That's how he described his underwhelming trip. And then he was also a Zionist, but he claimed that it was sparsely inhabited, and like Palestine was empty. That's not true. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
Nablus was a city, Hebron was a city, Gaza was a huge, thriving metropolis. So maybe he wasn't traveling there, but that's it. That's it, Jonathan. Jonathan knows the book I'm talking about, Innocents Abroad. Yes, that's the book Mark Twain wrote. Yeah, it was like a travelogue, and his travels in the Holy Land. Check out that book. It's a very, if you wanna, if you wanna see the American mindset, it's that book because it's 100 plus years old, but it could be written by an American today.
Yeah. Hmm.
They have a they're different from the old world, you might say, because you could see that, like, it's not an insult to any American who's listening, but it's like almost childlike uh, curiosity, and it's it's gone from the rest of the world. I'm not counting global South. I'm speaking about the traditional traveling world who used to travel a lot and all that. Americans are very exploratory, and Mark Twain, when he was there in Palestine, Lebanon areas, he was very curious. Like, it was interesting to see.
Yes, and also very underwhelming. Even nowadays, I
Yes.
was never there. I was never there.
Yeah.
But are the depictions that friends have told me about the pyramids in Egypt.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That
Underwhelming.
yeah, that they thought they were gonna see something absolutely incredible, and it wasn't anywhere near.
No,
Um, and
it's crowded. It's annoying. The tour guides bug you. It's a very bad vibe. And
yeah,
the Egyptian people hate the pyramids more than anyone, because the Egyptian people, they're like, man, we go through so many problems. We have so many political injustice and all that. But the world, on every postcard, is these damn pyramids, right?
mm,
These
mm,
pyramids, they don't help us in any way. Like, I guess you can make money being a tour guide, you know, but I can relate to the resentment, this big like uh, thing that you didn't even build, right? You just
yeah,
came upon it, and then the whole world puts it on a pedestal, like, you don't have to even figure, like, Egyptian people, they don't have to be relevant in Egyptology, I guess, except as manual labor to dig out sarcophagus. So
yeah.
they're not needed. They're not needed. So they hate the pyramids.
Yeah, well, and another aspect and that's why I was bringing this up, is that if, for example, I don't want people to mistake what I'm saying about the Holy Land being in the Iberian Peninsula
Mhm.
as being an absolute. What I'm saying is that the Holy Land can shift location depending on what is needed, right? And so, if the Holy Land is defined as somewhere in the south of the Iberian Peninsula,
Mhm.
then you do a crusade for that, right?
Uh,
If the Holy Land is defined as in the Middle East, then you do a crusade for that. If the
wow.
Holy Land is defined as in China, then you can do a crusade for that. So it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that
The
there is
location doesn't matter. It's
eh,
the story, the script.
exactly, if you put it over
Mm.
a place, a story that isn't native to that place, and you make it into some sort of holy land for this and that religion, right? What you're doing is you're creating a scenario, a backdrop for a war film, right?
Mm.
You're basically creating the scenario for a war film, and so that war film scenario, I think, was used in the Reconquista, and I think it's being used in the Middle East, and used for sure is going to be used in other places as well, as long as it's needed. Because, and this is a pattern that repeats, not because it's factual, not because there's one place that is factual, but because it works. You understand?
Mm,
We give, I mean, if you look at whatever, even the city that you're in, imagine that I presented evidence, fabricated as it would be,
mhm.
that the city that you're in Canada is actually the Holy Land, right? You're going to look at it with a different, mindset. You're going to look at it and you're going to see these things. You're going
And
to
have a different emotional bond, and
emotional bond, and then you will see that the supposedly oppositional religion, if they bought the same story, will get the same idea, and then you two come into conflict, right, over something that isn't even there, something that was just put on top of it. And this is the thing that I put just for consideration. Again, we're in speculation area.
right.
Is that these stories can be placed over, and it only takes, and we're witnessing live in our lifetimes. It
Wow,
only takes 1-2 generations to take hold.
wow.
1-2 generations. I mean, if in 10 years from now, right?
Mhm.
10 years from now, I don't know what your stance is on what happened in 2020. I'm not going to say the names so that it doesn't trigger algorithms.
I know exactly what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know what your stance was, but in 10 years from now, everything that was in the mainstream will be a fact. It
Right.
will be like, yes, there was this threat globally, and all the countries had to pass these laws and
And
had
they teach it
to
in the
act
schools to the kids.
exactly, etc., right? So
Mhm.
we're witnessing this, and it only takes 1 or 2 generations at most, and it will become a fact.
A
The
historic
old, the,
fact.
the people that remember will pass, and those that emerged from that will have this as a fact. So the
100%.
same can be done with, attributing holiness to something. And again, I'm not disrespecting any religion. What I'm saying is this can be done. This is an instrument that they can do, and
I
we're
was just
seeing it
showing
live.
while you
Yeah.
were talking about the repeating the holiness of a place and then garnering, crusading sentiment.
Hmm.
They did it in Africa too. In Ethiopia, there is a holy city. We're looking at it. It's a Muslim city. It's sometimes considered the fourth holiest city in Islam. And a little trivia, it's very close to where coffee was first brewed, right? The
Yeah.
discovery of the coffee bean was right around here. It's called Harar. It's not too far from where my dad was born. So Harar was the site of a holy war in Africa between the Christian Abyssinian Empire and the Muslim Adal Empire.
Hmm.
And the same religious fervor. Harar now belongs to Ethiopia, and it's a multi-ethnic city. But it used to be a holy Islamic city. I believe you couldn't even spend the night if you weren't a Muslim there. Back when it was part of the Muslim realm,
Hmm.
and they had a holy war. They had characters like every character had a long autobiography, I mean a long biography, and side stories, and the Jesuits were involved, the Portuguese came to help.
Hmm.
This was right around the Prester John timeline, and the Ottoman Turks were helping the Muslim side as well as the Mamluks in
Hmm.
Egypt. And it's funnily enough, today in 2024, Ethiopia and Somalia are having some geopolitical problems over a base because I guess the Houthis are doing a blockade on the Red Sea, and the same actors are present: Ethiopia,
Hmm.
Egypt, Turkey, and they're all helping the Muslim side, Somalia, which is a pseudo or a failed state, but it is a state nonetheless. The Somali people see themselves as a state, and Ethiopia um, may not be Christian as a government, but the people are, there is the Ethiopian church is still a thing. So
Yeah.
it's funny, the crusading or the holy war script has been repeated, and it has very similar blocks, like building blocks to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now imagine, I mean, I know that this, I mean, again, I don't want to offend anyone, but imagine that what we are talking about can eventually be verified, right?
Mm,
That there was this imposition of a story that didn't belong, right?
mm,
Imagine how a lower level, let's say soldiers, whatever, from both sides in the Middle East, in
mm,
Gaza, would feel if they actually were confronted with that information and actually looked into it, right?
mm.
Imagine how they would feel. I mean, I've wasted my entire life in this meaningless
Must be the most
conflict.
worst feeling ever, like betrayal, and you feel like, yeah, betrayed,
Yeah, yeah. From one
wasted
side
your
and the
life.
other. From one side and the other, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking lower level, so we're talking like the street level, let's say.
Mm,
So, how would you feel? And this is why it is so important, in my view, to detect the patterns,
mm.
to detect the especially the patterns used in the fakery. And of course, as you know, I don't go as far as IPS in that, because IPS is
The auto
uh,
hoax, yeah, hoax by default, and then work your way from there. That's his philosophy.
no. I go into auto hoax, sure, to see first. Take it from the perspective, because the idea is to sustain judgment. So
Skepticism, yeah.
instead of immediately saying it's false or it's true, is to suspend. I mean, suspend judgment in the
Suspension.
sense of wait, let me gather more information, let me see, let me
Mm,
look into it without making
a
a
judgment.
judgment beforehand. And after looking at it, then okay, I detect this, that, and the other. I can conclude one way or another.
Mm.
That is what auto hoaxing actually means. But the what I was talking about is that he sees correlations at a much, he sees the patterns at a
Yeah,
much deeper level than I do. And so
he's
kudos for him. And that's why I said that maybe it would be interesting to have him on a show if you feel so inclined.
he
But
intimidates me, but I do want to. I'm just being real. Like what you said is true. He is like, I think the him and my Jurassic Liars, too. Jurassic Liars, by the way, blocked me from his channel because only because I'm a Muslim. I never trolled uh,
yeah,
the chat or anything, but he blocked me. I was subscribed to Jurassic Liars like 2020, so 5 years now, 4 or 5 years, and but IPS is very, like, I think the most advanced pattern recognizer I've ever
yeah,
seen. And he's also like, a movie buff type, but not in the standard sense. Like, he watches movies for the tropes, for the patterns,
yes, yeah, yeah.
and and the and the predictive programming.
Yeah, the biggest and again we go into the crusade mentality, right?
Mm, mm.
The biggest problem with JL, with Jurassic Liars, is the fact that he does not actually live his religion,
Yeah, he's
right?
a Christ warrior, but he's not
A
really.
Christian, yeah.
Yeah.
Because if he was a Christian, right?
Mm,
If he was to be a Christian is to follow the footsteps of Christ. Whether we think that Christ was an historical figure or if he was a sort of archetype to be like a guidance. You
mm.
understand what I mean? Like an example
Yes, yeah.
for you to follow. I mean, whether you consider Muhammad to be an historical a person, or if he was also an archetype to be followed, it doesn't matter. That's secondary. Because what is important is if you subscribe and you say, I am Christian, I am Muslim, I am this, I am that, right? Then it means that you
Live by
follow the
these guidelines.
examples. Exactly. You
Right.
follow those examples.
Hmm.
And what JL does is he does. I mean, he's brilliant in seeing patterns, but then he more than do a religious thing, he politicizes them because
Right.
he places them in an us versus them mentality,
Hmm.
right? And he has said to IPS several times, and I mean that for Tim is water off a duck's back because Tim has been banned from YouTube. He has been sued. He
Oh,
has,
right. Yeah, he mentioned
you
that.
know, yeah, that's several. I mean, for Tim, that is nothing, right?
Mm.
But he says to Tim, "Well, Tim, I love, talking with you and changing these ideas, but you better convert, otherwise you're going to hell."
He told me
And
the
Tim,
same thing.
yeah, and Tim laughs in his face, not because he's disrespectful towards his religion, because Tim doesn't care if you're Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever. He doesn't care.
Hmm.
The thing is, I mean, why
Why
why are
bring it
you
up?
putting one thing and the other together? We're identifying patterns, and all of a sudden you wear your missionary hat, right? And because the best way, what is the best way?
Sorry.
In fact, in actual truth, we're not talking about manipulating. Okay, what is the best way that you convert someone? You convert someone by example. You
Yeah,
don't
by your
convert
act.
someone.
Yeah.
Yes, you don't convert someone by convincing them that you're right and he's wrong, right? You don't do that. You don't go there and convert them by force, for example. You don't do that. What you do, an actual true conversion, is, oh man, that guy is an example, man. I admire him.
Yeah.
I
I want to
think
live
there's
like that.
something there. Yeah, I think there's something there. And
Mm.
then you ask, hey, well, why do you behave like that? And you say, well, it's my religion that. And why is your religion there? And you go into a discussion, and maybe you discover something that fits you, and you convert, right? So um, it just becomes the secondary over the primary.
100%.
Yeah, it gets ridiculous in my
Like
view, and
the
someone really.
priorities are warped when you are like thumping your faith at a almost a mathematical exercise. Pattern recognizing is mathematics. It doesn't matter about the spiritual nature of the recognizer,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah, yeah.
he did it the same, kind of the same, because I don't come from like a religious like I'm not a Muslim scholar in the chat when I'm watching his live streams, but I mentioned to him, or in the past I mentioned that I'm a Muslim and I
Mm.
cover a lot of Islamic themes. So he, before banning me many times, he would be like, uh, Bach, I know you're a Muslim. Just know that you're going to hell. And he would say that in his life. You're going to hell because you believe in Allah. And hey, even your religion says Jesus is coming back, not Muhammad. Your religion says Muhammad is dead, but Jesus is coming back. So he was like, and then he banned me. So uh,
Yeah, and now imagine that you were in the same mentality, and you would say, no, 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 you're going to hell. And
exactly.
you become, no, you're going to hell. No, you're going. I mean,
Like
come
I'm
on.
there for the patterns,
Yeah.
uh, Jurassic. I want to hear your Trump stuff. Okay, whatever. You think I'm going to hell? Don't block me. Just let's talk about the patterns. So you're right. Uh,
Yeah.
JL can be self-defeating in that aspect, but uh, uh, my
Yeah,
friend
but
Armin,
oh, sorry.
we do kind of have to
Okay.
wrap this up
Okay.
because
Okay.
we
Very
went
well.
over schedule.
I
So
am sorry
you were
about that.
saying? No, 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 no. It's on me. I'm the timekeeper.
Hmm.
And this was a wonderful live stream. Um, if I could, uh, I would have gone longer, but this is giving me an idea for an opportunity for recurring invites, and we cover. we continue this in the near future, and you are more than welcome to come back, man. Like, I think you're one of
Thank you,
my
man.
most highbrow, if not the most highbrow, um, person on the channel thus far. So I don't know if I'm not looking at the chat right now, but I if you guys have any questions for Armin, ask away. I am more than certain you benefited from listening to us talk, and he has unique, and also the standard history of Portugal. We learned that, but he has unique insights on a few things. So I'm not putting this in the vault. I'm keeping this public for everyone so that you can come back and look. And if there's any key parts that you left, you can go back and return to. I'm speaking to the listener now.
Well,
Uh,
I also thank you, Bach, for the opportunity and the invitation and all the chat that I didn't pay the attention that perhaps I should have, but I was focused on the
oh, you did,
conversation.
yeah,
But
you did great, man.
and thank everyone. And of course, it was a pleasure. And of course, if there's a second time, of course, I'll be here. Sure.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
yeah.
Let me just pull up your channel one more time for.
And let me also suggest, apart from IPS, that you also invite Silas. I think you'll have a field day with Silas as well.
I would love to speak to Silas. You've given me the confidence to
Yeah.
invite all these wonderful people that I truly did want to speak to before, because I knew Silas before I knew you. I knew IPS before I knew you.
Hmm.
Um, but for some reason, you were my first guest from. I'm not gonna even say that realm, because we're from that realm. Me and you, we're from
Yeah.
this realm together. So this is Armin's channel, guys. Go subscribe to him. Uh, I've also you have archive.org link for your older content. I'm sure. Let me show.
It's supposed to be the same content, but for some
Oh,
reason, I can't log in anymore,
oh no,
and I can't update the archives that I had there. For some reason, I've contacted it by email, and they don't reply. So
I'm
I'm
sorry
going to
about.
try to update again, to log in and update again, because that's basically where I put everything, just as a backup, as a kind of yeah, backup to, in case something happens to YouTube or whatever,
Yeah, it's
that kind of
never
thing.
wise to just put all your baskets in one egg. You're right,
Yeah.
my friend.
Mhm.
You also have an Odyssey.
Yeah,
Going to
the
follow
Odyssey
you.
is for the longer stuff, like the podcasts, which usually are from 1 hour to 2 hours to almost three.
All right. Yeah.
Conversations like this that we've had, where I put not only the podcast but conversations that I have over Discord with different people.
There is
Um,
Silas that you were just mentioning. Silas
yeah,
speaks.
yeah. Silas is a good friend, and the that is for the longer formats, because on YouTube, since I didn't give them my details, they only limit me to 15 minutes.
All right. Yeah, they don't have the long format for. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You know what? You're smart in that sense. You're at least you're not. You don't rely on YouTube maintaining
yeah.
your privacy in that sense. You have no contractual nothing with
No,
them.
no,
Smart.
and I would even suggest to you, and I've told you that over a text exchange that we had.
Hmm.
I would suggest to you to consider Odyssey as your main platform, because
Hmm.
I've never heard of them censoring anything, at least up to this point.
Up to this point,
And
yeah.
they also have live streams, and they also have all these capabilities. Of course, it's not exactly the same as YouTube, but it has all these functionalities that you use as well. And if
Mm.
you're able to transfer your audience, and they have memberships as well, as you can see
Oh,
there.
right. Yeah.
So if you're able to transfer somehow your audience from one platform to the other, I
Hmm.
think you'll find yourself more at ease, and without all these hassles of having to come up with code words instead of saying
So
the
true.
direct term and that kind of thing.
You feel like such a, excuse my language, like
Mm.
the B word. You feel like such a bitch when you do that, and it really is
Yeah.
emasculating, and you don't feel like a man when you have to. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm using code words, and they can still
Yeah.
nab me anyway, and it's such a.
Yeah. 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 It is. Yeah. So my suggestion would be Odyssey if you're able to transfer. Of course, it's not easy, but that's something for you to consider. And there's also a way you can ask Tim of the IPS how it's done, and even the fakeologist. He's very obliging in terms of technology. Ask how you can live stream both at the same time, both on YouTube and Odyssey, because that can be done, and Tim does it. So,
Okay,
yeah, there is a way to do that. Yeah.
okay, I'll look into that.
Mhm.
Jonathan has a good question.
Yeah.
Is Christopher Columbus a hero in Portugal?
No, no,
No.
no. Christopher Columbus is considered, of course, he's not Spanish.
Yes, he was
He's
like a
Italian,
Italian.
yeah, but he's considered a Spanish hero, even though
Thank
it
you, Rebecca.
was, even though it was Christopher Columbus that supposedly hinted at the discoveries of the Americas to the
Mm.
King of Portugal. So, of course, it wouldn't have been the King of Portugal; it would have been the Templars. But in official terms and in official history, no. Christopher Columbus is a hero in Spain, not in Portugal.
Hmm. All right, Armin. Thank you so much, my friend. This was
I thank you
very
too,
productive, and
and I hope people enjoyed as well.
thank you. I'm certain they did. This has been my best live stream. I'm just going to end this with I don't know how to end this. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you listening in. Jonathan has another question. Do, do Brazilian ladies like Portuguese men as much as, quote, I heard they like Americans? All else being equal?
Well, uh, yeah, to a certain point, yes, and the other way around as well.
And the other way around?
Portuguese women like Brazilian men. Yeah,
Oh,
there's a big in terms of linguistics. The language is the same. Don't get me wrong, but the way it's spoken, the difference for the Portuguese when you hear Brazilian makes it exotic.
it's
Um,
always, what's that saying? The grass is greener on the other side or the other lawn?
yeah, but the thing is, for example, if you are an English speaker and a Arabic speaker, so
Correct.
for a non-native Portuguese to learn Portuguese, it's much easier to learn Brazilian Portuguese. And the
Oh,
reason for this is that if you read a text in Portuguese and you follow the vowels, in Brazilian Portuguese, the vowels are always open.
okay.
In Portugal Portuguese, the vowels sometimes are open, sometimes are closed. It depends on the actual wording in the sentence, right? So,
Hmm.
for example, let me think of a word. Um, okay, so football, right?
Mhm.
Okay, we would say football.
Yes.
So the U is almost unheard. So football,
Hmm.
football, right? The Brazilians would say futebol,
Yes, that's what I see. Yes,
futebol,
Gucci ball.
right? Yeah.
Sounds very
So
Filipino.
yeah, all the syllables, and all the vowels are there, and you can hear them, and you can when you speak them, you actually so you read a text, you don't have to do a secondary processing of the information, right? You can speak it directly. And in fact, for someone who doesn't speak Portuguese to listen to a conversation spoken in Portugal Portuguese, it sounds like Russian because it's all
That's
the
to me.
vowels are all
Yeah.
inwards. Yeah,
To me, I see the sing-songy nature of both languages very
hmm
similar.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. They have nothing to do with each other, but in phonetics, they sound the same.
They sound alike. It's so
Yeah,
strange. Yeah. Anyways, Armin, I'm going to let you go.
Very well.
And
Thank you.
thank you, my
And
friend.
thanks for everyone in the chat.
Please subscribe to Armin's channels, Odyssey. He also has a FM website for the podcasts,
Mhm.
and his YouTube is what's on the screen right now.
Yep.
So if you need to find Armin, that's where you'll find him. Uh, Wonderful, wonderful guy. When I first heard him, I didn't even think he was Portuguese. I thought he was just a guy from Boston or something. But he is Portuguese uh, in Portugal. For some reason, I thought he was an art. I don't know where I heard that. I must be conflating Armin with somebody else. I've heard say he's a architect. It was maybe someone on Fakeologist, but wonderful guest. I hope he comes back. He's very intelligent, well spoken. I love his channel, and thank you everyone in the chat. We're going to cover a few more contemporary stuff soon. The Lebanon Theater opened up. I actually DM'd someone in the chat recently. Oh, Armin has a post. I just remembered the orange thing for next time. Oh, right. Yeah, we only covered it a little bit. And Matthew, good to see you again. Uh, I hope you take in what we're talking because this is a lot of highbrow history. This is the sort of stuff if you took history as a major in college, this is what you'll be studying. If you were studying the history of Portugal, and then we add a little bit of the occult, the non-mainstream stuff. So there you go, Matthew. Matthew is a teenager. Um, I think he's 17 or 18 years old. Okay. Yeah, Armin, we covered the orange stuff, but only tangentially. We need to deep dive into that. Uh, I also wanted to look into the Lebanese theater. I spoke to someone in the chat. They're actually in Lebanon right now. I don't know if they want to reveal themselves, but they're a long time listener. They're not based in Lebanon. I made a dua for their safety, but they're of Lebanese background. They have family, and they were established in Lebanon, so they're witnessing what's happening there, right? First hand account what's happening there. Oh, you're turning 18 next year? That's good, man. The big 1-8. So, inshallah, we'll get some updates from the Lebanese theater. In the Discord, before I went live, someone, I think it was Dominion, sent me a link where they are speculating Hassan Nasrallah might have been dead, might have been killed. Let me see if there's any updates to that. Just Yeah, it was Dominion. Let me just share this with you guys. A very quick thing from the server. 1 second. And make sure to hit the likes, everyone. I haven't been pushing for the likes as much as I usually do because I had a guest I was focused on. But I hope you guys did not let me down. You know the situation with this channel. We have to work twice as hard as the normal people. We have to, like, if you like a channel's content, you have to like mine twice as much for it to not be shadow banned, right? So just let me just hold on. There we go. Just sharing the Discord for a second. I want to show a video, and you OGs, you tell me if you notice a few patterns. Hannah says Hassan Nasrallah was not killed. By the way, that's exactly who I was referring to. Hannah is in Lebanon. So Hannah, you are my Lebanon correspondent. This is a video from Twitter. Check out the symbolism, guys. The checkerboard and the the color scheme of the blasts. Oops. So they're claiming, or they were speculating, that Hassan Nasrallah was targeted in those strikes. It was a neighborhood in, I believe, Beirut. But latest reports are he is still alive. Thank you, Hannah, for confirming. Uh, we're gonna deep dive into the Lebanese theater, the newest addition to the Israel war in the region. And John, what? Nasrallah can't be killed. You know, they could. Here's one possible scenario in with Hezbollah and Israel. You know how I've been talking about the U.S. State Department or the Anglo-American realm begrudgingly having to be like being forced to dismantle Israel? It could very well be a dismantlement for dismantlement. Like, you you do it and I do it back. Like in the back rooms, the Russians and the Americans could very easily have this arrangement where they say, all right, I'm going to dismantle Israel, but you got to dismantle Hezbollah. All right. So let's, time reveals everything. So let's give uh, this developing story some time, and then we'll confirm. But I really do think that's what's up. Uh, my main premise that Israel is being dismantled, that hasn't changed. There are a lot of things they're not talking about, reporting the fact that millions of Israelis already left that country. They're not talking about that. What does a victory, a W for Israel even look? You do know the moment they genocide or get rid of every Palestinian, they're going to start turning on each other, right? They're going to treat their Hasidic demographic or their religious demographic the way they treat Palestinians, right? They're going to treat them, oppressively. And I don't remember the name of the politician, but an Israeli politician literally said the exact same thing. He said, uh, once they dealt with the Palestinian problem, they're going to go for the conservative religious, the ultra orthodox problem. So, Marcel, they kill one, but 10 rise at the same time. Israel lost or is losing big time. I totally agree with you, my friend. By the way, Marcel, sorry about what happened to your. Let's not go into there, but let's keep that in mind. So exactly, Marcel. Matthew cosigns, and the theatrical aspect of it all is always like we've seen enough of the playbook to know they have a playbook, right? So never discount the prearranged theater. I'll never forget this. Um, I believe he was an ex-ISIS fighter, or he could have been a YPG, like the Kurdish militia fighter. Some guy, I can't find this clip now, but it was one of these obscure clips on the internet. But he was an ISIS fighter talking about how his commander would make him or make his battalion or his troops evacuate a place they were holding, and then he will see as they're evacuating in their shiny brand new pickup trucks, he would see the YPG soldiers drive towards the place, right? And then without a single shot being fired, right? The ISIS commander just tells his soldiers, "Yep, we got to leave, guys." And then they look at the horizon, they just see the the YPG Kurdish militia come in, and the Kurdish militia then stays, and then after a bit, the Kurdish militia, without firing a single shot, they evacuate, and it's a ghost town, and then the ISIS people move in. So what does that tell you? That tells me, at least, a lot of this is just theater and moving populations around, and you know, empty empty stuff being blown up, and you know, the script aspect is very, very palpable. That's what I think is. I don't think that's going to happen, Jonathan. If anything, it's the first person who are going back to Brooklyn are the lapsed Jewish Israelis, the more secular, more tech savvy, uh, less religious, more liberal Zionists. They're the ones who will panic and are panicking and would easily just relocate and set up shop elsewhere. And you know they are professionals. They have businesses to run. They have work to do, and uh, all of this is a distraction to their mission, their career objective. And you know, don't think this is a wild way of thinking. A lot of people in the West think this way. They don't think about uh, nationalism or patriotism or their civic duty. All they want to do is advance their careers and raise their families, and you know, this is maybe this is the normal way to think, right? Who knows? Who am I to judge? Hannah, same as in the north of Lebanon, they have moved people to the south in mass. Now, Hannah, if you look back at the 1948 theater, right, in Palestine, it was exactly that. It was just uh, Palestinian leadership telling their civilians, leave, evacuate now. Little did they know, they'll never come back. They never came back. They thought it was just a temporary thing, but now it's like 3, 4 generations later, they're a diaspora all over the Middle East and all over the world. So if there's a lesson to be learned from this aspect of the conflict, is when you hear evacuation calls, do not leave. If you think you might never come back, maybe it's better to just stick around. Who knows, right? So I guess with that I'll end it, guys. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.